Welcome to this special archival deep dive. I'm honestly endlessly fascinated by what we're looking at today.
Oh, absolutely. It's a massive collection.
Yeah, it really is. Because today we are opening the historical records of the Tahala archipelago. We're going to examine a highly polarizing, incredibly complex figure. We are diving into the dossier of Tovan Lighthold.
The High Commissioner of the City of Eagles.
Exactly.
And it's a profound topic. We have a mountain of archival documents, official Golden Lion manifests, and historical accounts to synthesize for you. But our mission for this deep dive is very specific.
Right. We're taking a particular angle today.
We're going to examine Tovan's regime strictly from his own perspective. We want to step inside the mind of a visionary leader who genuinely believed, with every fiber of his being, that he was pulling a city of 40,000 people back from the brink of chaotic ruin.
Yeah, and to be clear, we aren't here to play moral arbiters today, and
Oh.
we certainly aren't here to endorse authoritarianism.
No, not at all.
We just want you to see Tahala through Tovan's eyes, to, understand the internal logic of how he looked at a dying, decaying society and decided that a rigid, unyielding system was the only way to save it.
What's fascinating here is that history is usually written by the victors or the victims, but rarely do we get to examine the pure, unfiltered rationale of the architects of strict order. And Tovan was, above all things, an architect of order.
He really was.
According to the archives, he transformed a staggering, corrupt, and frankly failing port into an absolute powerhouse of a city-state. He did this using methods that, while incredibly harsh, he viewed as the only mathematical path to survival.
Okay, let's unpack this because we really need to understand the sheer scale of this place.
Yeah.
The environment dictates so much of his policy.
It's a very unique geography.
It is. I want you to imagine Tahala for a moment. It's a twin island city built right into the faces of these massive 300 to 500-foot sea cliffs.
Towering above the water.
Yeah, right. You have these sprawling terraced roads and stone stairways. There are enormous cargo elevators connecting the lower docks to the upper estates, and it's all surrounded by the warm, unpredictable tropical waters of the archipelago. And standing at the absolute pinnacle of this vertical metropolis is one man.
And he is quite a man to behold. Let's look at his physical presence. In politics, especially in a volatile region like the Tahala archipelago, physicality is a crucial component of authority.
You cannot project power if you don't embody it.
Exactly.
Let me paint a vivid picture of Tovan Lighthold for you, because the visuals alone are striking. Tovan is a Leonin.
Which, for those unfamiliar with the archival terminology, means he is a massive lion-headed humanoid.
Yes. We were talking about someone who stands a full 7 feet tall.
And weighs over 420 pounds.
Right. He has this rich, dark, brown, black fur that is immaculately groomed. He's got this massive, flowing black mane that frames his face. And then there are his eyes, these intense, calculating amber-orange eyes that just seem to pierce right through whatever he's looking at.
It's an imposing image. But it is crucial to note how he dresses that massive frame. His appearance is a meticulously crafted tool of statecraft.
He's not just relying on brute size.
No, not at all. Tovan doesn't look like a wild beast or a common brawler from the lower docks. He presents himself with absolute rigid formality. He wears a formal, navy black military dress coat that is heavily trimmed with gold.
Right, with the insignia.
Yes, he displays the Golden Lion insignia prominently on his chest, complete with heavy, ornate, golden epaulets. This isn't just clothing, it is the calculated look of absolute stability.
I can't even imagine the tailoring budget required to fit a 400-pound lion man into a perfectly fitted, gold-trimmed naval coat.
It must have been astronomical.
But joking aside, the visual impact of that is very intentional. I want you to imagine standing in the bustling, humid streets of Tahala's upper city. The salt air is blowing off the ocean. Merchants are shouting over the grinding noise of the cargo elevators.
It's loud, it's chaotic.
Exactly. And through that crowd walks Tovan Lighthold. To the wealthy merchants, this regal, disciplined bearing is beloved. When they see him, they see safe trade, they see regular shipping lanes, they see prosperity.
But if you take an elevator down to the lower docks...
Down to the slums, yeah. To them, that exact same image is utterly terrifying.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Tovan's presentation is his very first line of defense. By projecting the image of an alpha predator perfectly restrained by military discipline, he accomplishes two things simultaneously.
What's the first?
First, he inspires unquestioning loyalty from his troops, the Golden Lions. They see a commander who is both physically superior and entirely in control. Second, he demands complete submission from his political rivals,
Because you do not argue with a 400-pound lion.
especially not one who looks like he has the entire administrative machinery of a city backing his every word.
It's an incredibly effective psychological tactic. But to understand why Tahala supposedly needed that level of rigid discipline, we really have to look at what the city was like before he took absolute control. We have to look at the stagnant city that Tovan inherited.
Right. The Tahala of the past was cosmopolitan, certainly. It boasted a population of 40,000 citizens, predominantly of Chiltan descent.
And for context, this means the populace largely hailed from a mainland culture known for vast, perilous jungles and ancient, enduring traditions.
Tahala was supposed to be a shining maritime extension of that resilience, but instead, it was rotting from the inside out.
The archives paint a picture of a city that was bleeding out, slowly and painfully. You had these massive crime syndicates practically running the dock triangle in the lower city.
It was a mess.
Widespread poverty. Petty warlords shaking down merchants for every copper piece they had. There was an absolute lack of unified direction. The governing bodies were paralyzed by corruption and indecision.
Which brings us to Tovan's core worldview, a philosophy we can best describe as ledger logic.
Ledger logic?
Yes. From his own perspective, Tovan doesn't see himself as a tyrant. He sees himself as a pragmatic leader, willing to do the terrible math that weak leaders avoid. In his mind, a society cannot survive if it is infected with chaos.
He genuinely believes in sacrificing the few to save the many.
Exactly. He looked at the crime-ridden streets of Tahala and decided to trade the soft, comfortable lies of a chaotic, failing democracy for the hard, uncomfortable truths of a secure, authoritarian state.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. He didn't just take power abstractly. He centralized it physically.
Yeah.
He established his command center at a structure called the Lighthouse.
A very fitting name.
But this isn't your average beacon for lost ships.
Uh.
This is a fortified, mage-warded spire sitting 500 feet above the sea. It is completely inaccessible without an explicit invitation. And from that spire, he instituted what he called stability fees.
A fascinating administrative euphemism.
Right. Euphemism is the perfect word, because essentially these were heavy taxes levied on all trade flowing through the port. But wait, stability fees. That sounds an awful lot like a glorified protection racket to me. Was he actually providing infrastructure, or was this just extortion with official paperwork stamped on it?
Well, from the perspective of the merchants who were being squeezed, it certainly felt like extortion. But from Tovan's perspective, this was simply the price of civilization.
How so?
Think about it. Before Tovan, merchants were paying bribes to 3 different gangs just to get their cargo off a single ship. Tovan streamlined it. He taxed the trade to fund a massive, highly trained security apparatus, the Golden Lions.
Ah, I see.
If you want the road safe, if you want your cargo to arrive without pirates seizing it, you pay the stability fee to the state. It is ledger logic in action. You pay for order, and order is delivered.
Okay, that makes sense from a strictly operational standpoint. But an enforcer on the street isn't enough to secure an entire maritime empire. You need ships. You need to control the waters. And that is where Tovan crosses a massive ethical and technological line.
He had to. To protect a massive maritime hub like Tahala, you need unrivaled naval supremacy. The archipelago is plagued by fierce tropical storms, dangerous ocean currents, and aggressive foreign threats.
Traditional sails and unpredictable winds just aren't going to cut it.
Precisely. They are simply not sufficient for a regime that demands total control over its borders. You cannot build a flawless ledger if your supply chain relies on the weather.
Which leads us to the most controversial of Tovan's infrastructure projects, the necrotic wake.
A huge leap in technology.
Our sources detail these massive technological leaps happening at an industrial atoll known as Otamu's Forge. The archives say they're producing these things called Series 6 cores.
These were black amber canisters humming with raw necrotic energy.
And when we say necrotic energy in this context, we aren't just talking about abstract dark magic.
No, think of it more like a highly volatile magical radiation. It's an incredibly dense fuel source that literally decays the organic and inorganic matter around it if it isn't perfectly contained.
And Tovan's research and development division harnessed this. They use it to provide a reliable, overwhelming power source for his heavy Golden Lion warships.
The strategic advantage is undeniable. By utilizing these cores, his fleet was no longer at the mercy of the wind. They could outmaneuver, outrun, and outgun any rival faction or pirate syndicate in the region.
Objectively, from a purely strategic naval standpoint, it was a masterstroke.
It secured the city's borders almost overnight.
But the reality of moving that kind of volatile, radioactive, magical fuel is incredibly grim. We have to talk about the Sandpiper incident.
Yes, we do.
The Sandpiper was a civilian ship that was secretly contracted to carry these Series 6 cores, and something went horribly, horribly wrong with the containment.
The archival reports on the Sandpiper are very difficult to read. The necrotic cargo essentially leaked.
It didn't just leak, it cursed the ship. We aren't just talking about a fire in the engine room. The physical timber of the ship started rotting from the inside out.
The crew was subjected to severe magical radiation sickness.
The documents describe sailors mutating, their bodies decaying while they were still alive, coughing up blackened blood. The Sandpiper became this floating nightmare, eventually drifting right into Tahala's harbor for everyone to see.
It was a catastrophic failure of containment, certainly. But again, stepping back into Tovan Lighthold's perspective, he viewed the Sandpiper not as a moral failing or a reason to abandon the technology.
How did he see it then?
He saw it as a tragic but necessary supply chain risk. In any massive industrial leap, whether it's the discovery of steam power, nuclear energy, or necrotic cores, there are going to be industrial accidents.
So he just wrote off a ship full of agonizingly sick sailors as a rounding error.
In a word, yes. To Tovan, the heavy machinery of Atomus Forge, the sheer brutal output of those Series 6 cores, is the exact mechanism that keeps the entire archipelago safe from foreign invasion.
Because if Tahala falls to a foreign fleet, tens of thousands die.
Exactly. A single ruined ship, however horrific the details, is an acceptable loss on the ledger of the city's survival.
I want you, listening right now, to really consider that for a moment. Put yourself in Tovan's shoes and consider the crushing burden of leadership.
It's heavyweight.
If you had to power a city's defenses, if 40,000 lives depended entirely on your naval supremacy, would you look away from the ugly, decaying industrial realities that keep the borders secure? It is so easy to judge from the outside, but when the literal survival of your civilization rests squarely on your shoulders, the math of human life looks very different.
Indeed it does. And Tovan applied that exact same brutal arithmetic to law enforcement within the city itself. To clean up the streets of Tahala, he knew he couldn't rely on the slow, corrupt judicial system of the past.
He needed a strict, undeniable legal framework that allowed for immediate action.
Enter Article 7.
Article 7 granted the Golden Lion sweeping emergency powers, didn't it?
Precisely. It allowed them to completely bypass the traditional bureaucracy in the courts to detain subversives, criminals, and frankly, anyone deemed a threat to the stability of Tahala.
But what's really striking here is that he didn't just send thugs out into the night to disappear people in the dark. That's what a petty warlord does. Tovan built an entire massive bureaucracy around it. The archives extensively describe this place called the INK Factory.
The INK Factory is the administrative heart of Tovan's justice system.
And it sounds terrifying precisely because it is so mundane. It's this massive administrative center built with heavy stamped steel and large stained glass windows. They filter this sickly, permanent green light over everything.
A very oppressive atmosphere.
Very. And inside, you don't have torturers. You have armies of clerks. Thousands of them, meticulously documenting every single action. The sound of stamping paper echoes constantly.
They document every manifest, every requisition, every arrest, every transfer.
They generate the mountains of paperwork that legally justify the entire authoritarian system. It is chillingly efficient.
This raises an important question. How do you cure a sick society? In the medical world, if a limb is gangrenous, you amputate it to save the patient. If a disease is highly infectious, you quarantine the afflicted.
So for Tovan Lighthold, the answer to Tahala's societal sickness was a strict quarantine.
A highly documented, multi-tiered quarantine of subversive elements, yes.
Right, the tier system. Because once the INK Factory generated your paperwork, you were processed.
Yeah.
It wasn't just throwing people in a dungeon and forgetting about them. It was an industrialized penal system.
It was highly processed. Tier 1 was a facility known as the Dockhold, located down in the lower city. This was the primary intake facility for short-term detention and interrogation.
So if a citizen was deemed a minor offender, perhaps they couldn't pay their stability fee or they were caught in a petty brawl, they might be processed there, fined, and released.
But if they were deemed a persistent threat to the state, they were transferred to Tier 2.
Which was Azaka Hold.
Yes. Azaka Hold is an isolated island military fortress. It serves simultaneously as a long-term prison, a secure naval base, as a primary Golden Lion training facility.
It was, for all intents and purposes, a place for severe re-education and forced labor. The prisoners there quarried heavy stone, built naval defenses, and contributed their physical labor to the state.
From Tovan's viewpoint, it is a perfectly closed loop of systemic cleanup. You remove the chaotic, non-contributing elements from the streets of Tahala, and you put them to work fortifying the very civilization they threatened.
Nothing is wasted.
The ledger balances perfectly.
So what does this all mean when you step back and look at the entirety of the archival documents we've explored today? The stability fees, the necrotic warships, the endless paperwork of the INK factory. It means Tovan Lighthold built a society where absolutely nothing is left to chance.
Everything was controlled.
We have transcripts of his public speeches in these archives, and they are fascinating. He speaks of duty, he speaks of personal sacrifice, he speaks of the future of Tahala, and he does it with a genuine, unwavering conviction.
He isn't lying to his people to gain wealth. He believes every single word he says.
He built a city where the metaphorical trains run on time, the shipping lanes are secure, the paperwork at the INK factory is flawlessly filed.
The stability fees fund a military that ensures the vast majority of those 40,000 citizens sleep safely in their beds, all under the watchful, sweeping light of the lighthouse.
From the perspective of his own ledger, he believed he was curing the city of paralyzing indecision. Even if the cost was stripping away the civil liberties of his citizens and utilizing horrifying industrial magic.
He replaced the chaos of freedom with the relentless forward motion of his own will.
What a journey through the archives. We set out to understand Tovan Lighthold from his own perspective, and I think we've seen exactly who he is. He is a man who looked at a dying, chaotic archipelago and forged it into a disciplined, unassailable machine.
He didn't inherit this utopia. He rose through sheer intelligence, political will, and an unbending physical and administrative presence to become the ultimate authority in the City of Eagles.
And as we close the files on Tovan's regime for today, I think it is crucial to remember that true power, the kind of power that alters the course of history, almost always requires the suspension of sentimentality.
Tovan's Tahala is undeniably strong. It is prosperous. It is secure. He completely stripped the city of the corruption of his predecessors, replacing it with a system that prioritizes collective survival above all else.
It really leaves you with something heavy to think about. I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over on your own as you go about your day. If you dig deep enough into the history of any great, enduring civilization, whether it's a fictional city-state in an archive or a real-world empire, you will always find a ledger of hidden sacrifices.
Someone, somewhere, had to do the terrible math.
If Tovan Lighthold's ruthless arithmetic, his necrotic warships, his Article 7 quarantines, his stability fees, if all of that is the exact equation that guarantees a peaceful dawn for 40,000 citizens, at what point does a necessary evil simply become, well, necessary?
A profound question to end on.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the source material. We'll see you next time in the archives.